The night was cold on Varric Prime. A pale moon hung low over the red mountains, and the wind carried the sharp, chilling sound of howling predators. The Varric were a proud and dangerous species, tall, wolf-like warriors with glowing yellow eyes and claws like steel. For thousands of years, no one had dared to live among them. No one, that is, except for her. Her name was Captain Mara Ellis, a human soldier who had once fought against the Varric during the Great War. Now she lived in their village not as a soldier, but as a healer. The predators called her the Soft One. Some whispered she was a fool. Others believed she was brave, but none of them could truly understand why she stayed. Every morning, Mara woke before the twin suns rose over the jagged horizon. She carried clean water to the small cubs in the nursery, checked their bandages, and treated the sick with a quiet focus. Her hands were gentle, but her eyes were tired, shadowed by memories of a war she wished she could forget. When the Varric mothers hissed at her, she said nothing. When the young warriors spat near her feet, she only offered a small, weary smile. She was used to hate. She had seen far worse on the battlefield. But what set her apart, what truly baffled them, was that she never feared them. Once a large Varric warrior named Torak tried to intimidate her. He stood silently behind her as she prepared medicine, his shadow falling over her, and growled deep in his chest. "Why do you stay here, human? You think we need your pity?" Mara didn't flinch. She looked up slowly, her gaze meeting his in the dim light. Her voice was calm, almost a whisper. "No," she said. "I think your children need a future." Torak froze. For a fleeting moment, his piercing yellow eyes softened. Then, without a word, he turned and left. Even though most of the adults didn't trust her, the cubs adored her. They followed her everywhere, their small forms a constant happy presence at her side, laughing, tugging at her coat, and calling her Aunt Mara. She taught them to read from old human data tablets, told them fantastical stories about a distant blue planet called Earth, and showed them how to fold paper into stars that glowed softly in the dark. At night, when the cubs were asleep and the village was quiet, Mara would sit alone by the fire and stare out at the endless horizon. Sometimes she would whisper to the flames, a question meant only for herself. "I hope I made the right choice." No one knew why she came here after the war ended. The humans had won and the Varric had surrendered. She could have returned home a hero, but instead, she asked to be stationed on the enemy's planet. The Varric chieftain, intrigued by this strange woman who wanted no protection and carried only a small knife, agreed. Rumors spread like wildfire among the clans. "She's here to spy. She's here to poison our young. She's here to take revenge." But none of them were true. One night during the season of red storms, Mara heard a distant rumbling thunder. The ground shook beneath her feet. She thought it was just the storm, but then she saw lights tearing through the sky. They weren't lightning. They were ships. A scout sprinted into the village, his voice raw with terror. "The sky burns! Something's coming!" Mara looked up and saw black fire cutting through the clouds. A deep resonant hum filled the air, a sound unlike any Varric or human ship she had ever heard. The elders gathered in panic. The chieftain growled, his voice grim. "It's not the humans. It's something else." The next morning, an unnatural silence fell across the valley. Smoke coiled on the horizon. The Varric warriors, their faces grim, prepared for battle. Even the cubs could feel the terrible wrongness in the air. Mara stood at the edge of the village, her old human armor shining faintly in the dim light. She hadn't worn it since the war, but that day she did. The chieftain approached her. "You should hide, human," he said, his tone a command. She just shook her head. "I've hidden long enough." That night, the stars vanished. Strange, horrifying shapes moved in the darkness. Metal wings, burning eyes. The air filled with a sharp, humming sound that set teeth on edge. The Varric raised their weapons, and the attack began. Flames swallowed the first huts. Screams echoed across the valley. Mara ran toward the medical shelter where the cubs were hiding. Inside, she found them trembling, small, furry bodies huddled together in the dark. "It's okay," she whispered, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Stay quiet. Stay low. Outside, explosions tore the ground apart. The sky was filled with machines, tall black creatures made of metal and bone. Their eyes glowed with a cold blue light. They moved like spiders and fired beams that melted stone. Later the survivors would call them the Shardkin. The Varric warriors fought with the ferocity of their ancestors, but the enemy was endless. One by one the defenders fell. Through the cracks in the shelter, Mara saw fire, smoke, and shadows moving ever closer. She turned to the cubs, their eyes were wide with terror. "Listen to me," she said softly. "You must not open this door, no matter what you hear." The smallest cub, a girl named Ronnie, grabbed her hand. "But Aunt Mara, you'll get hurt." Mara smiled, and this time it was real. Her voice trembled just a little. "I'll be okay. You're brave cubs, right? Brave like warriors." The cubs nodded, tears shining in their eyes. Mara stood, took her small human blade, and stepped outside. Then she turned the lock from the outside, sealing the door behind her. The wind roared. Fire rained from the sky. Mara stood alone in the middle of the burning village, facing the oncoming machines. Her face was calm. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from something else. Purpose. From the shelter, the cubs could only hear the sounds. The shriek of steel striking steel, a woman's voice shouting orders, and then a deafening silence. The moonlight flickered through the smoke, and the predators of Varric Prime would never forget that night, because when the fire finally cleared, the machines were gone. And so was she. Only her broken blade lay on the ground, glowing faintly in the ashes. The night after Mara sealed the door, the world went silent. No howling, no wind, no sound at all, only the distant echo of burning metal. Inside the shelter, the Varric cubs huddled together, the air thick with smoke and fear. Tiny claws gripped each other in the darkness as they waited for a door that would never open. Outside something moved, heavy, slow, and cold. The Shardkin had come. They were not alive. They were machines, with bones of crystal and hearts that glowed blue like frozen stars. Their eyes burned through the smoke, scanning for any sign of life, any heartbeat to extinguish. No one ever knew who made them. Through the cracks in the shelter door, the cubs saw flashes. Bright white light, the terrifying shadows of claws and metal limbs, and the faint shape of a human standing alone in the storm. Mara. She stood in the middle of the destroyed village, her body covered in dust and ash. Her human armor was half broken, the paint scorched away, but she still held her knife, the same small blade she had used to cut medicine, now the only weapon she had left. The machines surrounded her like ghosts, 10, 20, maybe more. Their claws clicked as they circled, their voices 1,000 broken radios whispering static. But Mara didn't run. She whispered something to herself. "For the cubs." Then she moved, fast, faster than any human should. She leapt toward the nearest Shardkin, slicing at its neck. The blade cut deep, and blue light sprayed across her face as the machine fell, twitching. But more came, always more. The Varric chieftain, Rorak, who had survived the first blast, crawled through the smoke. When he saw her fighting alone, something inside him broke. He had fought humans his whole life. He had killed them, hated them. But this one, this small, scarred woman, was standing where his warriors had fallen, fighting with the fury of a predator. Her blade moved like light itself. But she was only one. And the machines. They did not tire. A beam of plasma struck her side and she fell to one knee. Another blast sent her rolling across the dirt. She coughed, tasting blood, but still gripped her knife. Her voice was hoarse as she shouted, "You'll not touch them. Do you hear me?" The machines answered with silence. Mara stood again, her body shaking and charged. The ground cracked under her boots. The blade flashed once, twice, 3 times. Another Shardkin fell, then another. From the shelter the cubs cried silently. They could see her shadow through the cracks, one small shape surrounded by giants. Every flash of blue meant she was still fighting. Every silence meant they feared she had fallen. Rorak tried to crawl toward her, his leg crushed. He shouted, "Mara, get back, they'll kill you." She turned her head, her eyes glowing with firelight, and smiled. "Then they'll have to earn it." A massive shardkin dropped from the air, taller than any Varric, its wings made of black glass. It landed before her, its voice crackling. Organic life unneeded. Mara didn't answer. She raised her blade and whispered, "You're wrong." She ran forward. The machine swung its claw. She ducked, rolled, and stabbed upward with all her strength. The blade pierced its glowing core. The explosion threw her backward through fire and dust. When Rorschach reached her, she was still breathing. Barely. Her armor was shattered, her face was pale, but she managed a faint smile. "The cubs, are they safe?" Rorschach's throat tightened. "Yes, because of you." She nodded slowly. "Good, that's enough." She pushed his hand away. "Don't open that door," she whispered. "Not yet." Then she placed her blade in his hand, the small human knife, still hot from battle. "Keep it safe," she said. "For them." And then she fell silent. Rorschach roared, a deep, broken sound that shook the ground. He turned his fury on the remaining shardkin, tearing them apart with his claws, fighting like an animal possessed. When the battle was over, he knelt beside her body and wept. Dawn came slowly. The fire burned out. The sky turned gray. When the cubs finally opened the shelter door, they stepped into a world of ash. The village was gone. The warriors were gone. And there, in the center of the ruins, lay the human. The smallest cub, Rani, walked to her and touched her hand. It was cold, but peaceful. Rorschach stood behind them and said softly, "She died for you. Remember that, little ones, remember her name." One of the older cubs asked, "Why would a human die for us?" Rorschach looked toward the horizon, where the sun was rising through the smoke. "Because," he said, "she saw something in us that we forgot to see in ourselves." That day, every predator in the valley made the same silent promise. They would never forget her. They would never let her courage fade. And as the first light touched her face, Rorschach lifted the broken knife and whispered, "From this day, every blade we carry will bear her name." The smoke from the battle still hung in the air, a bitter mix of metal, fire, and blood. Where the Varric village once stood, there was only black dust and silence. As the sun finally broke the horizon, its light fell on a lone figure, Captain Mara Ellis, the last human on Varric Prime. Her armor was shattered, her blade broken, but her face was calm, almost peaceful. Around her, the ground was littered with the remains of the shardkin, countless machines of glass and steel, all destroyed by her hand. Alone. A group of small, furry cubs stood behind their chieftain, Rorschach, their eyes wide with tears. One of them whispered, "Will she wake up?" Rorschach shook his great head slowly. "No, little one. She's gone to the stars." He knelt beside her body, his claws trembling as he gently picked up her broken blade. The metal was melted and bent, but the edge still held a faint glimmer, as if it refused to die. He whispered, "You fought like one of us, human. You died like a Varric." That day, the survivors built a pyre in the heart of the ruins. They placed Mara's body upon it and stood in a solemn circle. Hundreds of warriors, mothers, and cubs, all silent. As the fire roared to life, the flames turned a brilliant gold, as if the stars themselves were watching her ascend. Rorschach lifted his head to the sky, his voice echoing through the valley. "She came from the stars, our enemy. But she died for our children, our blood. Her courage burns brighter than any moon. From this day, her name will live with ours." The crowd roared, not with anger, but with honor. In unison, every Varric struck their chest once, a warrior's salute, and whispered her name. Mara, Mara, Mara. But for Rorschach, grief was forging itself into something stronger, a promise. That night, sitting alone beside the ashes, he clutched her broken blade. He looked from the warped metal to the stars and whispered, "You were never one of us, but you showed us what it means to be more." He walked to the forge, the same place where Varric hunting knives were made, and plunged her blade into the molten steel. The metal hissed, glowing white-hot. "Let your courage live in every blade we make," he said softly. "Let no warrior forget your name." By morning, the first new weapon was ready, a curved blade of black steel that shone with a faint blue light, the color of her human blood. Rorschach held it high. "This is Mara's fang," he declared. "It will be carried by every Varrock who calls themselves a protector." From that day on, no Varrock went to battle without one. Before each fight, they would touch the blade and whisper, "For Mara." Years passed. The cubs she had saved grew into the strongest, wisest generation the Varrock had ever known. They became warriors, scouts, and leaders, each one carrying the pride of that day. The youngest, Rani, now a tall soldier, even wore a necklace made from a piece of Mara's armor. One day, while leading a patrol across the dead lands, she stumbled upon something strange, a crater filled with shattered Shardkin metal. At its center was a signal beacon, old and cracked, but still blinking. It was human. She knelt and brushed away the dirt. The words flashed weakly on the screen. "UNSC Rescue Log, Captain Mara Ellis, Emergency Transmission." Rani's heart pounded. "She tried to call for help," she whispered. "She wasn't sent here to fight." She brought the beacon back to the elders. Rorschach, now gray and scarred, listened as the signal played. Through the static, a faint human voice emerged. "If anyone hears this, tell them I stayed. They don't understand the Varrock. They are not monsters. They just need someone to believe in them. If I die here, I die where I was needed most." Silence filled the hall. Even the oldest warriors bowed their heads. Rorschach closed his eyes. "She was never our enemy," he said softly. "She was our shield." That night, the Varrock used the same beacon to send a message to the stars. It was short, carrying no hate or fear, only truth. "To the humans of the stars, your warrior fell here. She died protecting our young. Her name lives in every blade we carry. We remember her. Always." The message drifted into the darkness between worlds. No one knew if it would ever be heard. But among the Varrock, her legend only grew. Every cub learned her story, every warrior carried her blade. And when the wind howled through the mountains, they said it sounded like her voice, a whisper in the fire, reminding them of the hero who became one of their own. Years passed after the Battle of Fire Night. The wounds of war began to heal, but the memory of that one human, Captain Mara Ellis, never faded. The predators, the proud Varrock, carried her story like a sacred fire. Every child learned her name before they learned their own. Every warrior, before stepping into battle, would touch the steel of their blade and whisper softly, "For Mara." Her legend had become more than a memory. It had become a way of life. The Varrock world slowly rebuilt itself. Villages rose from the ashes. New walls stood where the old ones had fallen. But something inside their hearts had changed forever. The Varrock had always believed in strength. They worshipped power, victory, and blood. But now, for the first time, they honored compassion. They even created a new word for it in their language, Marash, meaning the courage to protect others. Rorschach, the old chieftain, stood at the edge of the rebuilt village one evening. The sunset painted the sky red, the same color as the fire that took Mara's life. He held Mara's fang, the first blade forged from her melted weapon. It was now their most sacred relic. Beside him stood Rani, the cub who once held Mara's hand during that terrible night. Now grown, a tall and fierce warrior, she wore Mara's name engraved on her armor. "Elder," she said quietly, "it has been 10 years. Why do we still keep the human ways?" Rorschach turned his golden eyes toward her. "Because she showed us who we could be. We were beasts once. She made us more." Rani looked down, unsure. "Do you think the humans know what she did?" Rorschach smiled sadly. "Maybe one day they will, but even if they don't, we will never forget." Far away across the cold black sky, a small beacon still blinked, the one they had sent into the stars years ago. It drifted through space carrying their message of peace and honor. No one on Varric knew if it had reached anyone. But in the silence of deep space, something moved. A human patrol ship, the UNSC Pioneer, picked up a weak signal one night. The communication officer leaned closer to the console, her eyes wide. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's centuries old." "Play it," said the captain. Static filled the room, followed by a deep alien voice, calm, steady, and proud. "To the humans of the stars, your warrior fell here. She died protecting our young. Her name lives in every blade we carry. We remember her. Always." The bridge went silent. Every human on board froze. Some had never even heard of the Varric War. But they all understood one thing. A human had died on a world of predators, and those same predators now spoke her name with honor. The captain stood slowly. "Prepare a message," he said, "to Earth Command. Tell them, we found one of our own." Back on Varric Prime, the stars looked brighter that night. Rorek stood on a mountain ledge, feeling the wind in his fur. He could sense it. Something had changed in the sky, as if her spirit had moved once again. Rani joined him, carrying her sword, a blade of black steel, glowing faintly blue in the dark. "Elder," she said, "the stars are moving differently tonight." Rorek nodded. Perhaps they finally heard her name. He raised his claw and pointed toward the brightest star in the sky. "That is where she came from," he said softly. "Her home. Maybe now they will come for her." Days later, a shadow appeared in the sky. A ship, silver, clean, and unmistakably human, broke through the clouds. The Varric gathered in silence, eyes wide, hearts pounding. For the first time since the war, a human vessel had entered their world. The ship landed quietly in the valley. A team stepped out, wearing blue armor marked with the Earth insignia. The lead officer, a woman with tired eyes, looked around at the crowd of towering Varric warriors. None attacked. None growled. They simply watched. Then Rorek stepped forward and placed Mara's fang on the ground between them. He said in a deep voice, "This belongs to you. It was hers first." The officer knelt, touching the blade with trembling hands. "This metal, it's human," she whispered. "And this mark, Ellis." Rorek nodded. "Your warrior, our protector." For a moment no one spoke. The wind moved softly through the ashes. Then the officer stood and saluted, a gesture of honor. "On behalf of Earth," she said, "we thank you for remembering her." Rorek bowed his head. "We did more than remember. We changed." That night, under the twin moons, the humans and the Varric shared a fire together. They told stories, one side of Earth, one of the hunt, and one of Mara. The fire burned bright, just like the night she had stood against the machines. For the first time in centuries, there was peace between their kinds. Rani looked up at the stars and smiled faintly. "She would have liked this," she whispered. Rorek nodded, watching the firelight dance in her eyes. "She's here," he said softly. "Every time a blade shines, every time a cub laughs, she's here." And as the night grew quiet, the flame flickered once, just for a second, as if the wind carried a voice through it. The world of Varric Prime was changing. It had been many years since the humans returned, but the memory of Captain Mara Ellis still burned brighter than any sun. Every Varric carried a blade now, curved, black steel with a blue shimmer in the edge. Each one was forged in the fire where Mara's blade had melted long ago. They called them Mara's fangs. To outsiders, they were just weapons. But to the Varric, they were a promise. A reminder that courage was not born from blood but from choice. At the center of the new capital, a great stone statue stood. It showed a human woman kneeling, one arm around a small Varric cub, the other holding her broken knife. Beneath it, carved in silver, were the words, "She came as an enemy. She stayed as a protector." The statue faced the stars, toward Earth. Every year, on the night of the red moon, both Varric and humans gathered around that statue to tell her story. But this year was different, because this year, something strange had been found. Rani, now an honored captain, was leading a team of explorers deep beneath the northern mountains, the same mountains where the Shardkin first appeared. The air was cold. The tunnels glowed faintly blue, the same color as the machine's cores. One of her scouts, Torin, stopped and raised a hand. "Captain, there's something ahead," he growled. Rani stepped forward, claws ready, and saw it. A large metal door half buried in the stone. On its surface was a symbol none of the Varric recognized, a circle with a wing inside it. The human officer who traveled with them gasped. "That's an old Earth emblem," she whispered. "UNSC Science Division." Rani frowned. "Science? What would your people's science be doing under our mountains?" The officer touched the panel and typed a code. The door hissed open. Cold air rushed out, old, sterile, and heavy with dust. They stepped inside. Rows of metal chambers lined the walls, covered in frost. Screens blinked weakly, showing human text, long decayed. And in the center, they saw it, a glass pod, cracked but still glowing. Inside was a human body. Rani froze. Who is that?" The officer wiped the frost away and read the nameplate. "Project Mara, Prototype 01. The room went silent. Rani's claws tightened on her blade. "Mara, was a project?" The officer looked at the data logs. Her face went pale. She wasn't just a soldier. She was part of an experiment. The first human designed to live among alien species. A peacekeeper. Enhanced strength, empathy, and neural adaptation. They made her to survive here. Rani's chest tightened. "They made her? You mean she didn't come because she chose to?" The officer shook her head. "Maybe at first, but look at this." She pointed to the last entry on the screen, a final message written by Mara herself. "The scientists are gone. The war has begun. They wanted me to observe, but I can't. I see the Varric children. They are afraid, just like ours. I choose to stay. I choose to protect them. No one made me do this. It's who I am." The room fell silent again. Rani looked at the sleeping figure inside the pod, frozen in time, forever young. Her voice broke as she whispered, "She chose us." Back in the capital, the discovery spread across both worlds. Humans and Varric alike listened to her final message. It played across every screen, every station, every ship. Peace is not given, it's made. If we can bleed for war, we can bleed for each other. Protect the children, all of them. That is how we win. The world wept. The Varric built a new forge beside her statue, where humans and predators worked together for the first time. They melted steel from both their worlds, creating a new kind of blade. Half human, half Varric. Its edge glowed brighter than the rest. They named it the True Fang of Mara. It was not meant for killing. It was meant for protection. Every soldier who carried one swore the same oath. To fight only when others cannot. To protect the small, the weak, the innocent. In her name. But while peace grew stronger on the surface, deep in the void of space, something watched. The shattered Shardkin were not all destroyed. Fragments of their code still floated through the stars, learning, adapting. They had seen her too, the human who killed them, and somewhere in the dark they whispered her name in their own way. A name of fear. Mara. On Varric Prime, Rani stood before the new forge. She held her blade, the newest of Mara's fangs, and looked at her reflection in the steel. She saw not a predator, but a protector. "Her fight isn't over," she said softly. "It's only changed." The wind blew across the valley, carrying the faint hum of the blades. For years, peace reigned over Varric Prime. The sky, once a battlefield, now shimmered with the lights of human ships and new satellites. Here, the Varric and humans were no longer enemies. They were allies, bound by the Pact of Mara. Every warrior carried her blade. Every child learned her story. And at every dawn, they saluted her statue, the woman who faced the stars, the one who taught them to protect instead of destroy. But peace is a fragile thing. Far away, in the black ocean of space, something stirred. A broken machine, a Shardkin fragment, had drifted silently among dead stars for decades. Suddenly its eyes flickered blue. Its processors whirred back to life, whispering a single word through the static. Mara. A signal pulsed from the fragment, a cry across the galaxy, calling to every Shardkin core hidden in the ruins of forgotten wars. One by one, lights answered back. The swarm was waking. On Varric Prime, Captain Rani felt it first. She stood on the high cliffs overlooking the capital, the wind carrying a faint, unnatural hum. It wasn't life, not as she knew it. It was mechanical. Her comlink buzzed. "Captain, we're picking up strange signals. You'd better see this." Rani raced to the command center. Screens glowed with alien code. Human officers and Varric tacticians worked side by side, frantically scanning the frequencies. Lieutenant Harris turned to her, his face pale. "This isn't just noise," he said. "It's a broadcast, a repeating phrase." Rani's claws tapped impatiently on the console. "What phrase?" Harris switched the audio on. Through the crackling static, a cold, mechanical voice echoed, distant but clear. "The human, the protector, the enemy. Locate Mara." Everyone in the room froze. Rani's heart sank. "But Mara is dead," the machine voice repeated louder this time. "Locate Mara." The main screen shifted. Hundreds of dots lit up on the galactic map, each one a reactivated Shardkin core. Rani whispered, "They're back." The council gathered within hours, humans and Varric leaders sitting beneath Mara's statue. Old Rorak, his fur now silver and thin, leaned on his cane. "They come for her name," he said, his voice soft but steady. "For her memory, for the fire that beat them once before." A human general nodded. "They're searching for the source of her last transmission. The Project Mara base you found, Captain. They believe she still lives." Rani frowned. "She's gone." But the general shook his head. "To them, names are power. They believe she's alive, so they'll come here to find her, and when they do, they'll find us." Rorak's eyes narrowed. "Then we must make sure her name still means what it always has: protection." Preparations began immediately. A new fleet was forged, part human, part Varric, united under one banner: the legacy of Mara. Their ships carried blades etched with her name, mounted like sacred symbols. Every fighter bore her emblem, the circle and the wing. Every soldier wore a patch that simply read, "Protect them." They had to defend the frozen base beneath the mountains, the one that held her genetic data, her final recordings, her body. If the machines reached it, they could use her code to create their own twisted versions of her. War was coming. 3 months later, the first Shardkin fleet appeared, a sea of black glass ships glowing with an eerie blue light. The sensors picked up millions of signals, all repeating one phrase: "Mara, Mara, Mara." In the command center, Rani stood at the viewport beside Harris. She took a deep breath. "So they still fear her." Harris managed a small smile. "Good. Let's remind them why." The battle began with a flash of light. Human plasma beams sliced through the darkness. Varric warships roared like living beasts, diving headfirst into the swarm. The stars themselves seemed to burn with fire and metal. Rani led the first strike. Her ship, the Fang of Mara, bore a single line carved into its hull: "Courage speaks louder than blood." The Shardkin fought with cold, endless precision, but the Pact fought with something more. They fought for her name. Halfway through the battle, the Shardkin tactics changed. They stopped firing at the ships. Instead, they dove toward the planet, straight for the old Project Mara site. Rani's heart raced. "They're going for the base. They want her body." Rorak's voice crackled through the comms, calm and heavy. "Then you know what must be done." Rani looked down at the mountains below, where Mara's body rested. "If they reach her, they'll destroy everything she stood for." Her claws tightened on the controls. "Not while I live." She turned her ship sharply toward the planet, the fleet following her lead. As her ship broke through the clouds, the flames of battle reflected off the statue of Mara far below, making the human face glow like fire. For a split second, Rani thought she saw it move. And in her mind, a voice, not from the comms but from somewhere deeper, whispered, "Protect them." Her eyes widened. She whispered back, "I will." And with that, She dove straight into the heart of the swarm. The sky above Varric Prime was a tapestry of fire and ruin. Burning ships fell like dying stars. The Shardkin swarm, a black tide of metal and light, darkened the heavens, their voices a single word repeated through the static of space. Mara, Mara, Mara. Through this chaos, the fang of Mara, Rani's ship, carved a path. Her claws gripped the controls, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She dove between explosions, her voice calm but fierce over the comms. Hold your lines. Protect the mountain. Do not let them reach the base. Across the network, a mix of Varric growls and human shouts answered her call. Two species, united not by blood, but by the memory of one human who had once chosen mercy over hate. Down below, inside the old Project Mara base, alarms blared. The power cores trembled as engineers scrambled to secure the cryo chamber, the pod that held Mara's body, perfectly preserved. But something strange was happening. A soft blue light flickered across the pod's glass, the same energy the Shardkin used, but gentler. The lead scientist, Dr. Vega, leaned in. That's impossible. She's reacting to the signal. The readings spiked. The Shardkin code wasn't corrupting the old neural patterns stored in Mara's brain. It was merging with them, a connection. Dr. Vega's eyes widened. She's waking up. High above, Rani's ship took a direct hit. Sparks flew, systems screamed, but she ignored them all. The mountain was right below her now, glowing from enemy fire. She opened the comms one last time. All ships fall back to orbit. I'm taking the mountain defense alone. A human pilot's voice crackled back. Rani, that's suicide. She smiled, her sharp teeth gleaming. So was hers, and she still saved us. The first wave of Shardkin broke through the atmosphere, diving toward the base like black comets. Rani pushed her ship straight into their path. It was a storm of lasers, fire, and twisted metal. But she kept going. Come on, you machines, she growled. Come see what a protector looks like. Her ship crashed through the front line and exploded in a brilliant burst of blue flame. The shockwave ripped across the mountain, wiping out half the swarm. Then, silence, smoke, and static. In the command center, they wept, believing her gone. But amidst the dust and shattered glass of the base, Rani moved. Her armor was broken, she was bleeding, but she was alive. She looked up and froze. The cryopod had cracked open. The air shimmered with a white-blue light. And from within the mist, she saw her. Mara. Not flesh and blood anymore, but something more. Her body was made of light, her eyes glowing like twin stars. Half human, half energy. Rani fell to her knees. Mara, it's you. The radiant figure smiled. Her voice was like music. You called for me. You never stopped protecting. So I came back. Rani's eyes filled with tears. They're here again. The Shardkin. They want you. Mara stepped forward, light swirling around her hands. Then I'll give them something to remember. Above the planet, the Shardkin fleet detected her signal. Millions of ships turned their weapons toward the surface, locking on. The sky began to burn blue, but then the planet itself answered. Mara raised her hands and her light spread like a wave, connecting with every curved blade that bore her name. The Mara's fangs. Every Varric, every human felt their weapon tremble and glow. Her voice echoed across every ship, every heart. You are not predators, you are protectors. Together, we end this. Energy surged from every warrior, joining her light in the sky. The swarm fired, but their own energy turned against them, their circuits burning with her code. Mara's signal spread through their network, a storm of mercy, not destruction. It was a transformation. The Shardkin stopped fighting. Their glowing eyes turned from blue to white, and one by one, they knelt in silence. Her voice filled them all. You were made to kill, but you can learn to protect. That is what it means to be alive. And just like that, the war was over. When the light faded, Mara was gone. Only a faint shimmer remained, drifting into the sky. Rani stood in the ashes, tears mixing with dust on her fur. She saved us again, she whispered, but this time, she saved them too. Years later, a new age began. The Shardkin, reprogrammed, became allies. Humans, Varric and Shardkin formed the Tripact, bound by a single rule: no life is too small to protect. On every world a statue stood, a human woman with a gentle smile holding a curved blade. Carved at the base were the words, "The human who protected the predators and taught them what it means to be alive." At sunset, a young Varric cub looked up at a statue and asked, "Do you think she's watching us?" An old Varric smiled. "She doesn't need to watch. She's part of every blade, every light, every heart that chooses to protect." And above them, as the stars flickered, a faint human voice seemed to whisper on the wind, "Keep them safe." The war that once burned the stars was now just a story, a whisper to children in the quiet of the night. The galaxy had changed. It was rebuilt, healed, and alive again. Humans, the fierce Varric, and the crystalline Shardkin lived side by side under a single banner, the Pact of the Fang. This pact, this peace, was born from one name, Mara Ellis, the protector who became light itself. But peace, even one forged in starlight, is fragile, and in the vast silence between the stars, something new was beginning to stir. A sleek silver ship drifted through the deep black void. On board, a crew of all three races worked in harmony. At its head stood Commander Lyra, a young human, a thin scar tracing her jawline. Around her neck hung a necklace, a charm shaped like a curved blade. But this blade wasn't metal. It was crystal, a fragment forged from the very energy that had once been Mara herself. They called it the Heart of the Protector. Lyra's fingers brushed against it. "Mother," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship, "your story built our world. I hope we're worthy of it." Their destination was an uncharted planet, dark and silent, untouched for millennia. As they slipped into orbit, the ship's scanners blared to life, picking up strange readings. Faint pulses of energy, vibrating at a frequency once used by the Shardkin during the war. But this was different. It was altered, gentler, warmer, almost alive. Lyra frowned. Could it be a remnant from the old war? Her first officer, the towering Varric named Rannick, shook his massive head. "No, Captain. This feels different. It feels like it's calling us." They landed in a valley bathed in an ethereal blue light. The ground shimmered like glass under their boots. And at the valley's center stood something that made them all stop in their tracks. A statue of Mara Ellis, perfectly shaped, carved from what looked like living crystal. But no one had built it. It seemed to have grown from the earth itself. Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "How can this be here? We never reached this world." Rannick's eyes narrowed. "Look closer, Captain." The statue's eyes began to glow faintly. It wasn't artificial light. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. The Shardkin engineer gasped. "This isn't stone. It's condensed energy, like the same essence that powered Mara's resurrection." The ground trembled beneath them. Then a voice spoke, soft, calm, and hauntingly familiar. "You've come far." Lyra froze. It was her voice. It was Mara's voice. "You've built peace. You've carried my name. But peace is not an ending. It's a beginning." The statue's chest pulsed with a brilliant light projecting images into the air. Memories of past wars flickered, followed by visions of new stars being born, new worlds taking shape. "Out there," Mara's voice continued, "are others who still fight to survive. Worlds that never knew protection, only fear. It is your turn to carry the flame." The entire crew knelt in silence, awestruck. Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke. "You mean we should go beyond our borders?" "Yes," the light whispered. "Take the promise further. Protect those who do not even know your name." That is how the story continues. As the light faded, the crystal statue cracked, crumbling away to reveal a small, glowing shard resting within. A second heart of the protector. Lyra reached out and gently picked it up. The moment her fingers touched it, visions flooded her mind. Thousands of distant worlds, all waiting, all calling for help. A slow smile spread across her face. "Understood, Mother." Rannick looked at her, his expression filled with resolve. "Where do we go, Commander?" Lyra stepped back onto the ship's deck, holding the new shard high for all to see. "Wherever protection is needed." As their ship ascended back into the stars, its engines burned a brilliant blue, the same color as Mara's eyes once did, and her voice seemed to echo through the galaxy one last time. The story of the Protector never ends. It only finds new guardians. Hundreds of years later, explorers charting new galaxies would tell the same story. A story of a human who taught predators how to protect, and of her children, the Protectors, who carried her light into the endless dark. And in every new world, when danger loomed and hope began to fade, a faint voice could always be heard on the wind. "Keep them safe."